What's up, everybody? So there is some new information coming out about the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. This information was redacted in documents that were released previously. In this article, it talks about how CBC fought to have some redactions lifted, and those redactions were lifted today, October 17th, 2025. The article from CBC is linked in the description below if you want to go read it for yourself. Witnesses describe hearing vehicle the night before Nova Scotia children were reported missing. Two people who live near Jack and Lily Sullivan's home told police they heard a vehicle coming and going in the middle of the night, just hours before the Nova Scotia children were reported missing. The new details from witnesses are laid out in redacted records that were previously released in August at the request of CBC News and other news agencies.
5 months after Jack and Lily Sullivan vanished, their stepfather Daniel Martel says he continues to search for answers and cooperate with police. That included when cadaver dogs recently came to his property.
I come home and the dogs were already, on scene, and they were there for about an hour before I got there. I didn't know the exact day when the arrival was going to happen. So it was even a surprise to me, but at the end of the day, everything's ruled out there, and I hope this speculation, turns elsewhere.
They were reported missing from a quiet road, and the files released this week added new, sharp details. Headlights at night, court orders for phones and bank records, hundreds of tips, and investigators still without a definitive answer. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell now for first-hand updates as the RCMP follows the threads this unredacted material exposes. On October 17, 2025, previously redacted documents about the disappearance of siblings Lily and Jack were made public after a legal challenge, and what surfaced matters because it fills gaps in the timeline and shows what police were doing behind the scenes. Redactions are usually lifted only when a court decides the public interest outweighs investigative sensitivity, and that is precisely what happened here. The CBC's legal challenge led to the release of a fuller record. Those unredacted pages are not proof of guilt or innocence. They are pieces of an investigatory puzzle that invite scrutiny and require cautious interpretation. Still, they contain items that change how investigators and the public think about the case. Witness statements describing late-night vehicle movements, court applications requesting phone and banking data, logs of where search teams went and what they covered, and notes about interviews and recorded conversations. Each of those snippets has practical value for detectives trying to reconstruct what happened between the last verified sightings and the moment the children were reported missing. One of the most immediate and striking items in the newly unredacted material are witness reports from neighbors who describe vehicle activity in the early hours of May 2nd. Brad Wong, a neighbor, told investigators he heard a vehicle come and go multiple times after midnight and later saw lights above the tree line from his elevated home on Jerilock Road. Independently, Justin Smith reported seeing a car turn near the railroad tracks at about 1:30 a.m., then described a 2-minute silence before the vehicle continued toward Lair Road. At the level of raw detail these accounts are compelling. They put movement in the area at times when few people would be out, but they also require the usual caveats that come with eyewitness reports. Nighttime observations are hard. Distance, tree cover, and darkness can distort perception. Sounds travel and echo, making it difficult to judge direction or number of passes, and memory can subtly shift over time. Investigators treat such reports as starting points. They map witness statements against any available objective data, surveillance cameras, dashcam footage, license plate reads, or phone location pings, to see if the claimed movement can be corroborated. Where a neighbor's testimony can be confirmed by an independent record, it becomes far more valuable than an isolated recollection. Where it cannot be corroborated, it remains useful but unverified, and investigators must weigh it accordingly as they prioritize follow-up steps. The documents also show investigators pursued legal avenues to get at digital traces that could answer those very questions. Court applications for phone, banking, and video searches were included within the filings released publicly. That sequence of warrants and applications is routine in modern investigations. police asked judges to authorize access to phone metadata, transactional records, and closed-circuit footage when those materials may show who was where and when. Phone metadata, the time-stamped pings to cell towers, the GPS traces from apps, and the network associations, can place a device in a geographic arc even if the content of messages is encrypted or deleted. Bank records can show purchases or fuel stops that help anchor timelines and movements. Video searches often involve canvassing local businesses, traffic cameras, and private footage submitted by residents. All of that work is legal and methodical. Investigators must show probable cause to a judge in order to obtain warrants, and they then carefully extract and preserve the data to keep it admissible later on. The unredacted filings make clear the investigation relied heavily on these technical tools. They are the modernized instruments that substitute for the immediacy of eyewitness certainty. Amid those searches and legal steps, family statements recorded in the documents present a conflicting picture that investigators must reconcile. According to notes, Martel said no one left the property during the relevant period. The mother reportedly said she went to bed and was unaware of overnight events. Those denials are part of the formal record and are precisely the kind of testimony detectives compare with the digital and physical evidence they gather. If a person asserts they were on site the whole time, investigators will check phone location logs, video feeds from nearby cameras, and timestamps on any electronic activity. It's important to stress that saying no one left is not incriminating by itself. People can be truthful yet mistaken about timings under stress, but conflicting accounts between family members or between family statements and other evidence create the very uncertainty police need to resolve. The newly unredacted records show those tensions plainly. Different people recall different sequences of events, and those gaps are the central reason judges have signed off on further data collection. It's also notable that at least one RCMP investigator's note, dated July 16th, described the disappearance at that time as not believed to be criminal in nature. That phrase is not an absolute conclusion. It represents an operational assessment at a point in the investigation. Investigators often change posture as new evidence emerges. A file can begin as a missing person case, evolve through targeted searches, and, if corroborating forensic or digital evidence points to foul play, be upgraded to a criminal investigation. The July 16th notation indicates that at that stage police did not have proof suggesting a clear criminal act, but it does not foreclose the possibility that later discoveries could alter that view. For the public and media, that kind of nuance is easy to miss. For investigators, it is the logic of operations. Never rule anything out until the evidence supports it. The unredacted documents also record disputed public commentary by relatives and associates. One identified commenter, Darren Gedde, known to have posted under an alias, publicly speculated about the mother's involvement. Those statements matter because public allegations by family or associates can be damaging in two ways. They can unfairly stigmatize people who are themselves victims or witnesses, and they can complicate investigators' work by generating waves of diversionary tips and inflammatory social media chatter. When family members or connected persons make public claims, investigators must sometimes spend time assessing whether the claims have any factual basis or are simply commentary. That assessment takes resources and can distract from other, potentially productive lines of inquiry. The unredacted record's disclosure of such speculation points to another hazard of high-profile cases. Private grief and public performance can blur together, and the result is noise that investigators must parse. What the released records also make plain is the scale of the physical search that already took place. Investigators and volunteers covered approximately 8.5 square kilometers with around 160 searchers, supported by dogs, drones, and helicopters. That kind of ground effort is logistically intense. It requires setting search lanes, logging GPS tracks to ensure coverage, coordinating volunteers so that searches preserve possible traces, and bringing in technical assets to see where human eyes cannot. Importantly, canine teams trained to detect human remains were deployed to high-probability zones and reported no indications of human remains. That negative result is significant in the sense that it reduces the likelihood remains were present in those specific areas at the time of canine deployment, but it is not a conclusive all clear. Environmental factors, time since the event, and prior human activity can all affect dogs' detection capability. Investigators describe the canine work as thorough and the broader sweep as exhaustive within practical limits, but the negative findings leave the most urgent questions unanswered rather than resolve them. Among the other items revealed in the files is reference to a recorded person-get-a conversation. The document notes that the recording exists but does not include a transcript or a verified summary of its content in the public redaction. That absence is important. Recorded conversations can be powerful evidence when authenticated and contextualized, but the mere existence of a recording without verified content does not prove anything. Reporters and the public often want immediate disclosure of such material, yet investigators and courts balance the public's curiosity against the risk of compromising investigations and unfairly shaping public opinion before authentication. The file's reference to the recording therefore acts as an indicator, something that merits follow-up and verification, rather than as evidence ready to be presented. What follows from these newly unredacted records? First, they add crucial witness detail and show the breadth of investigative action taken behind the scenes. Legal applications for data, extensive physical canvases, and focused canine deployments. Second, they expose the degree to which family statements differ and why those discrepancies are central to investigators' efforts to reconstruct a precise timeline. Third, the large-scale searches and negative canine results emphasize how difficult it is to find conclusive physical evidence in rural terrain and why digital forensics, phones, CCTV, bank records, are so critical. Fourth, the release highlights the damage that public speculation and family accusations can cause. When relatives post unverified theories, they complicate the investigatory landscape and generate noise that must be vetted. Each of these takeaways points to a simple operational reality. In the absence of clear, corroborated physical evidence, investigators must rely on the slow, patient work of matching objective data to human accounts. For members of the public watching closely, there are practical ways to help. Preserve any footage or messages that relate to the relevant time window. Do not alter or repost content that might be evidence, and contact investigators directly with tips rather than broadcasting them widely on social platforms. For journalists and commentators, the records underline the need for careful reporting, and proven allegations published in haste can do lasting damage. For investigators, the newly released material supplies both leads to test and cautionary reminders about the limits of human recollection. This investigation remains active and unresolved. The unredacted files do not solve the question of what happened to Lily and Jack, but they do sharpen the issues investigators must tackle, reconciling differing family timelines, verifying nighttime vehicle reports, extracting and analyzing phone and banking data, and carefully reviewing any recorded conversations that may shed light on actions taken in the early hours. The work is slow because it must be exacting. Every warrant, extraction, and lab analysis must meet legal standards so that, should charges ever be justified, the evidence will hold up in court. In closing, the newly unredacted records give us a fuller picture of what investigators have been doing and why the case remains unresolved. They add witness detail, document the scale of the searches, and show that police pursued digital and financial records to stitch together movements. They also remind us that public speculation and family accusations complicate an already painful search. Until objective, corroborated evidence ties movement, place, and person together, the RCMP's careful, methodical inquiry, now visible in greater detail thanks to these records, is the path that must be followed. Hold space for the missing children and for the painstaking work that brings truth into focus. We will continue to report verified developments as investigators confirm them and explain what each new piece of information means for the search and for justice.